Thank you. I'm humbled to be up here. I'm not mistaken about who I am. My children remind me of my capacities and limitations. My young daughter likes to reverse our roles and play a game of dog walker and dog, in which I'm the dog and she leads me around. And as she tells me, "Mom, you're not even a very good dog." So it's an honor, as a not very good dog, to be invited to speak to you today as we begin the semester, to dream with you about what is to come, perhaps to heal from past or lingering hurts, and to help navigate a way forward in a place that may feel simultaneously inviting and challenging. While some of us are coming with fresh enthusiasm and boundless energy, others of us may be tired. Our fuses may be short. You who've just arrived, you are impressive. We are excited you're joining the Gordon community. You could have chosen to study in a place where you could perhaps more easily avoid some of the tensions of our day, but I'd say you've chosen a great environment in which to work out our faith. What does it mean to study and to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit in an environment in which we are a faith community, but not all agree, a community in which we strive not to simply divide ourselves up into various camps, a community in which we're called to address the issues of today within a context of faith-seeking understanding? I'm sure many of you have heard today's passage on the Good Samaritan countless times. It's a beautiful, compelling passage, beautifully read by Jeff Miller. We may feel like the man by the side of the road and need to receive help even from those we despise. Or we may be in the position of the traveler encountering the person in need on the side of the road, which forces us to face difficult questions. Will we interrupt our own agenda and spend our own time and resources on someone who my tribe hates and thinks of as the enemy? Or will we sacrifice our own interests for this person, even if it turns out that it's his tribe that hates my kind and not the other way around? Today, I want to focus on the relationship between the victimized man, likely a Jew, and the responsive Samaritan. Bridging their multi-layered, divisive relationship is a significant challenge. How is it that a Samaritan would touch an unclean, nearly dead person on the road, not circumvent him, as had the others, not just see him, but stop, touch, care for, and make certain a long-term means of recovery for this man? This man was focused on what God was up to in the situation, how he could express God to others. This is what we're called to do? It's downright unhuman. Honestly, I don't see myself doing this in my own power. To see people as God does and act as God acts. This past May, I had the privilege of teaching on Gordon's Balkan semester. I met with a Bosnian friend from Sarajevo who had lived through the war there as a child. Curiously, she found a hardness that settled in post-war when neighbors didn't need each other as much. And today, she longs for greater and deeper community in her city once again. She has found hope in external ways of thinking, finding a common identity as Europeans in the European Union that she hopes can help bridge differences. This is a woman who will not first ask people who they are ethnically, nationally, religiously in that very charged environment. She strives to see people as humans first and foremost because she has lived what it means to be pigeonholed in one cultural identity or another. My friend was able to stop and see others as God's children, as human neighbors. The priest and Levite in the Bible passage, they were following rituals, maybe even keeping their commitments to others by neglecting the damaged one in front of them. But Jesus doesn't let them get away with that. They're shamed in this story for seeing but not stopping. One lesson I was reminded of by many during a recent trip to Brazil is that when one is with someone in a moment of crisis, it can be unloving to simply leave that person hanging for another person with whom one is scheduled to meet in the future. Don't you think the Samaritan, like the priest and Levite before him, was in a rush, taking a short route to Jericho, probably worried about being late to the obligation he had in the future? No matter, he saw who was in front of him, a neighbor in need. He stopped and acted in that moment. This call to stop, see, and act is key as we think on what it is that we're about here at Gordon. How is it that we can talk together, grow together as we pursue the liberal arts? How can we have the eyes to see what God is up to in this place? I could offer the standard line, which I do believe to be true. Pursuing a liberal arts education is an extraordinary privilege. Rather than merely and very quickly gaining technical skills for one profession or another, you will be challenged to stop and see what is really happening in so many different arenas. You will learn essential skills in flexibility, analysis, social intelligence, writing, public speaking, portable for any path you pursue post-graduation. Should you stop and see, your desire to learn may grow into lifelong desire to learn and help motivate you to act as God would. So you can, as many were reminded in orientation, take time to imagine, to create, to redeem this world. At the beginning of the passage in Luke, prompting the story of the Samaritan and the Jew, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Quite a challenge. Perhaps he wanted to trick him or use Jesus to affirm his own biases and convictions. The lawyer asked one of the most fundamental questions: how can I receive life that lasts? And Jesus says what many of us want to say, which is, you've done your research, right? You tell me. What's in the law to answer the question you raise? And on the surface, the lawyer does seem to stop and see, to get it. We're to love God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. Beautiful and comprehensive. But then, as if that's not a hard enough mandate, we're also supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. That is hard. I often do not. I am often so self-obsessed. What about me? How am I perceived? Have I been heard, affirmed, understood, or appreciated? Jesus does care about us as individuals, and perhaps even in what we believe. But in this passage, his message here is not about me, my wounded self, and my convictions. It's about my neighbor's wounded self. Love your neighbor. What does that mean? I want to love God. Honestly, even more, I want to be loved by God. And now I have responsibility in relationship to all these folks around me. As an acquaintance, Steve Moore recently wrote, I need to love God when the world seems totally screwed up, when dear ones die, when my prayers don't seem to be answered. I need to love God when I'm confronted with a highly unlovable person that God has created. When you and I love God with all our mind, maybe we can understand that and talk our hearts, souls, and strengths into doing things they really, really don't want to do. There was a time in my life I was so angry with someone who'd been a best friend. She'd made some awful decisions that deeply wounded and would continue to wound those around her. A confidant of mine said something wise to me, which I couldn't understand at the time. He said, showing pity in this case would be understandable and preferable to anger. So instead of rejecting her, I could go be a friend when what I wanted to do was evade what I saw as a half-dead person. Pity was not the end point, but it was a start. It was pity that moved the Samaritan to act in ways no one else would. You know, this question of neighborliness is not just about acting, it's also about receiving. I mean, what of the sense of agency of the victimized man? Yes, he was half dead, but some would rather die than engage with their enemies, or be touched by them, or even worse, be helped and then feel obligated to them or obligated to change one's view of them. This is not easy. My son loves to play the game, the would you rather game, as in, Mom, would you rather be a vulture or a lamb? Or would you rather be invisible or have the ability to fly? I always find it hard to answer those questions quickly. And in this case, we can ask, would we rather be the Samaritan or the Jew? Perhaps we're both, in need of healing and becoming healers, becoming and realizing our neighborliness. And believe me, this will matter the more you interact with your roommates, classmates, and new acquaintances here. This last month, some of my colleagues and I met with the pastor of a large traditional church in Sao Paulo, Brazil, a man who was tenderized by the brokenness of his sons who were struggling with mental illness. He was overflowing with love for his neighbors, poor and rich, and he was moved to act, to offer counseling services in his church, to support the education and care of his neighbors in favelas. This is a man who has slowed his ambitions and those of his church, not to grow in numbers, but in depth, in soul care, in tender mercy shown toward others, his neighbors. We need to be these kinds of people here at Gordon, even though these are not the easiest of times. We're here and we're excited, but many are very aware that some well-loved members of our community have left, and there's adjustment to so many changes. Even so, Rest assured in this: the faculty, administrators, and staff of this place called Gordon want to invest in you, to inspire you, constructively challenge you, mentor you, kneel before God with you, and learn with you in ways that you'll be hard-pressed to find elsewhere. We're here, and we want your flourishing. Trusting in God to help us, we stand ready to interrupt our agendas, our scheduled fast track to Jericho, to love you even as we lead you academically. We are all neighbors. It may sometimes feel like we're as different as Jews and Samaritans or Jews and Palestinians, but we are still here together. You're never in a place for no reason. There's always something God wants you to contribute and receive in every season and space. So I urge you to consider what it means to be the wounded man and what it means to be the Samaritan, to break down the barriers rather than suspect or reinforce divisions. Gordon has been, and I trust will continue to be, a place where all manner of conversations, civil conversations, can and do take place amongst neighbors. May we hold on to that. May we see, stop, and act. As my daughter is prone to say when I'm driving, "Mom, are we taking the long cut home?" Let's not take shortcuts, but rather the long cut of loving each other the way Jesus taught and modeled. Thank you.